Now, just one more little fun thing before we call this a day. I want to add a cable in here because a lot of times designers like to add cables to their products just visually, just so that they can show people what the product looks like with cables intact. And in our case, we have a fun problem in that we have two different cables that have to meet up in the middle and then come down and out the back, and then we might have a coil of cable coming out the back, so it should be kind of fun. What I like to do, as with everything, is start with the easy part first. So obviously, let's go Insert New Part, click the front plane, and cancel the default sketch. And then I'll rename this my cable. Now we'll take that, right-click, Save in External File, hit OK, so we've got a cable file to work with. And now we should be editing that file. You can see right up here on the right side of the screen, we're editing that in context. Let's turn on a section view using the right plane and hit OK so we can see the middle of this thing. And let's start with what we know. I'll grab the right plane of our newly created part and create a sketch on that plane. Now I'm going to make sure that no external references is checked because I don't want to constrain this cable at all. Cables are notoriously finicky to work with, and if you constrain them, you'll probably just make more headache for yourself than it's worth. What I like to do is comprise it mostly of splines rather than lines because that little bit of wobble in the curve makes it look more convincingly like an actual cable. And rather than try to bend around this 90-degree angle, I'm just going to draw out beyond a little bit here. Perfect. And do the same thing in the next direction. Let's run another intersecting spline straight down the middle here. The reason I'm not trying to round that 90-degree corner manually with one spline is that I find splines a little bit difficult to control, and it'll be much easier to have these overlapping splines. And then I can adjust those. And then I can always go up to the fillet tool in the sketcher. So let's go to my sketch fillet tool. Select this curve and then this one. It'll put a fillet in there for me. Let's set that to, I don't know, a 6mm fillet. That looks good. That'll trim that back, and I won't have to deal with making the spline round that corner. And I'll just go back through here and make sure that we have plenty of space inside. I'm just going to make sure that looks nice and clean. Looks good. And then this last bit here, actually, I'm going to trim this back. Sometimes you might want to trim something back. I just draw a quick line and then run my trim tool. And then under the power trim option, I can just drag across the parts I want to delete to get rid of all that extra stuff in one clean step. And that way my cable only comes to here, and then we can bring it back out in three-dimensional space. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So this is the first part. That looks pretty good. Let's exit this. And then I'm going to create a plane on this curve. Let's start here. I'm going to go to my Features tab, jump over to Reference Geometry Plane. My first reference will be that newly drawn curve, and my second reference will be the end point of said curve. That way I get a plane that is normal to that curve at the end point. Hit OK. And now we need to create the profile for that. So let's create a sketch on that newly drawn plane. And I'm going to draw a circle on one side. Let's rotate our view around so it's a little bit easier to see what we're doing here. Zoom back in. I'll give that a radius. It doesn't really matter what it is. I'm going to say this is a 2mm radius, or actually even 1.5, pretty thin. And then I'll take this and this point and make that coincident on the edge. And do the same thing on the other side. Let's just create another circle on the other side of this. Once again, this will be a 1.5mm circle. Select that edge, Control-click this one, make that coincident. I'm also going to take this circle, Control-click that circle, and make those tangent. And now one last thing before we exit this sketch. We can't extrude this because these two things are tangent in the middle, and there will be geometric errors with that. So what we need to do is actually add some piece of geometry that connects them so that they're not just simply touching in the middle. There's some meat there in the middle of this thing. So what I would do is just create another circle really fast. Something like so. Then use my trim entities command. once again on power trim mode, and I can just delete all of this stuff except those bits that connect them. And, this is extra, but it's tiny, and it's not going to be visible to most people. Now when we exit our sketch, we have one big shape rather than two shapes that touch in the middle, causing all kinds of problems. Let's go to our Features tab, do a Swept Boss, choose that new sketch, and our other sketch for the path. Then we can click OK. And that should sweep that right along, nice and clean like. It's looking pretty darn good. All the way through, and it comes out the back. Perfect. Exactly what we needed. Now we need to create the coil coming out of the back of this. So let's do that in the next video.